Cold doesn't negotiate. It steals heat fast, punishes mistakes instantly, and during World War II, it killed soldiers who never saw the enemy. While modern survival culture obsesses over thicker sleeping bags and high-tech insulation, wartime engineers went a different direction and quietly cracked the code. They built a simple survival tube that didn't fight the cold. It trapped the body, and it worked so well that its logic still embarrasses a lot of modern prep gear. If this kind of hard-earned history keeps your mind sharp, tap subscribe now so you don't miss the next lesson written in ice and steel. The problem armies faced was brutal and immediate. Soldiers operating in frozen forests, open fields, and bombed-out ruins couldn't afford bulky bedding. They needed something light, fast, and reliable when evacuation wasn't coming. Sleeping bags failed when wet. Wool froze stiff. Fires gave away positions. Frostbite didn't care about morale. So engineers focused on one enemy above all else: heat loss. What they came up with wasn't comfort gear. It was survival gear. The World War II survival tube was essentially a human-sized thermal envelope. No padding, no fluff, just a sealed or semi-sealed tube designed to stop the body from bleeding heat into the environment. The secret wasn't insulation. It was containment. Once inside, your own body heat did the work. The tube blocked wind, stopped evaporation, and prevented the deadly cycle where sweat freezes and strips warmth away. You know, this idea actually came from hard lessons learned in some of the world's most extreme theaters. Cold, well, it kills a whole lot faster than hunger ever could. Exposure just drains your strength way before your morale even realizes what's going on. And look, soldiers collapsing from hypothermia weren't weak at all. They were simply losing heat at a rate their bodies just couldn't replace. The tube, though, it changed that math entirely. So, here's what made it all so revolutionary. Traditional sleeping bags, they rely on loft, right? But loft fails the second it gets compressed, soaked, or frozen. The survival tube, though, it didn't care about any of that. It created a vapor barrier. All the moisture stayed inside. Now, that might sound uncomfortable, and honestly it was, but it completely stopped evaporative heat loss. In cold environments, dryness matters a whole lot less than warmth. Staying alive, well, that always beat staying cozy. Once you were sealed in, temperatures inside could rise dramatically within just a few minutes. Not because of any magic materials, but because, finally, physics was working in the soldier's favor. Wind chill dropped to zero. Heat loss slowed right down. Shivering eased off. Circulation stabilized. In survival scenarios, this wasn't just a sleep system, it was a pause button on death. Another advantage was speed. You see, a wounded or exhausted soldier could be placed inside in just seconds. No setup needed, no ground prep, and no need for a perfect campsite. In medevac situations, these tubes were used to stabilize casualties long enough to save lives. Interestingly, hypothermia treatment today still uses the same concept. Enclose, trap heat, and don't let it escape. Weight mattered too, you know. These tubes were lighter than layered bedding and took up less space. When supply lines stretched thin and movement was constant, that mattered more than comfort. The military didn't need soldiers sleeping 8 hours. What it needed was them alive at dawn. There's a reason this design quietly evolved into what we now call bivvy sacks and emergency thermal shelters. Modern versions add breathable membranes and reflective layers, but the core idea hasn't changed since World War II. Stop heat loss first. Everything else is secondary. What most modern preppers get wrong is assuming insulation alone solves cold exposure. It doesn't. Wind, moisture, and evaporation are the real killers. WWII survival doctrine understood this with ruthless clarity. They designed for worst-case scenarios, not weekend camping. There's also a psychological edge here that rarely gets discussed. When cold pins you down, panic accelerates heat loss. The tube gave soldiers a sense of enclosure and control. Once inside, breathing slowed, movement decreased, energy conserved. Survival isn't just physical, it's mental. The tube bought time for both. You could argue this was one of the quiet victories of wartime engineering. No medals, no parades, just lives saved in the dark. Long before modern marketing turned survival into a lifestyle, these tools were built by necessity, refined by failure, and proven under fire. And here's the lesson that still matters today. The best survival gear doesn't try to defeat nature, it respects it. The World War II survival tube didn't overpower cold. It isolated the human body from it. That's the difference between fighting the environment and outsmarting it. If you're thinking in modern terms, this is why emergency bivvies often outperform expensive sleeping bags in sudden exposure scenarios. It's why vapor barrier liners are still used in polar travel. It's why lightweight shells can save lives when heavy insulation fails. The war already tested these ideas at scale. We just forgot who taught them to us. History's survival code isn't about nostalgia. It's about reclaiming lessons paid for in blood and frostbite. The World War II survival tube stands as proof that simple ideas, applied correctly, beat complexity every time when survival is on the line. If this episode sharpened how you think about preparedness, share it with someone who still believes thicker gear means smarter survival. And don't forget to subscribe to History's Survival Code, because the past still has a lot to teach those willing to listen.